Ioannis is a member of the Central Committee and the European Policy Secretariat of Syriza, and he's also a member of the Executive Board of the Party of the European Left, while Giorgos is a member of Syriza's European Policy Department and has worked for 10 years as the political secretary at the headquarters of the Party of the European Left in Brussels, and now works at the European Parliament's GUE and GL group as a policy advisor. So they've come a long way, and just welcome them up into the stage.
Thank you, Ethan, and thank you. Well, we would like also to thank the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation for the invitation we received. So, concerning the debate we have, first of all, I will analyze a bit the period of 2010 to 2014 with the establishment of austerinarianism as the new normality and its lethal consequences for the Greek society. And although signs of financial and fiscal instability became more than evident in the last decade, the global crisis officially struck Greece in 2010 under a PASOK, the Social Democratic Party in Greece, under a PASOK government led by George Papandreou. Papandreou's government was the first Eurozone government to invite the International Monetary Fund to interfere in the internal European Monetary Union affairs through the formation of the Troika composed by the IMF, the European Union, and the European Central Bank. During the period of the implementation of the first Memorandum of Understanding, as it was called, with the Troika in 2010, on May 2010, the government quickly understood that it would be almost impossible to maintain social peace and consensus while applying the barbaric austerity provisions of this framework. That's why they decided to unleash an unprecedented smear and terror campaign against their own citizens. As always, major corporate media immediately became the pioneers of this new neoliberal crusade. Their main argument was that the application of the memorandum was the only solution in order to avoid an imminent Greek exit from the Eurozone. They enriched their narration by building up a sense of collective guilt. The dominant narrative presented the crisis as a Greek particularity because, first of all, Greeks had been living above their capacity, and second, because of the excessive public spending due to the existence of an oversized, non-efficient, and corrupt public sector. The same arguments against the Greek people were used mainly, but not exclusively, by German populist media such as Bild and Focus, but also by the rest of the governments of the PIG states. PIGS is an acronym for Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain, who were trying to convince their own citizens that their countries would never face similar problems under the ruling. And very soon it became more than evident that the crisis was neither a Greek particularity nor a consequence of excessive public spending because of an oversized public sector and an official re-registration of civil servants demonstrated that the Greek public sector was below average, European average. What really happened in Greece was that Greece was used as the first guinea pig of an unprecedented biopolitical experimentation on the new universal model of a European Union advanced competitiveness, which in a way is a violent redistribution of wealth and power from bottom to top, a transfer of commons and public services to the private sphere, and an abolition of fundamental social rights and services. And this is the new status quo of austerinarianism, an extensive violation of national constitutional ruling and parliamentary procedures, decisive role of unelected and uncontrolled bodies, violation of popular and national sovereignty. And this same neoliberal strategy has shifted from consensus to authoritarian enforcement and blackmail. As the official figures demonstrate, the real aim of this austerity strategy has never been the improvement of public finances and the control of sovereign debts. The aim of the memoranda strategy was to introduce this new state of normality in the European Monetary Union and the EU states. The Greek wage earners and pensioners have lost, as a consequence of that, 40% of their annual income in the last 4 years of the memoranda regime. At the same time, the right to collective contracts has been abolished. Direct and indirect taxes, such as the VAT and property taxes, have increased dramatically, especially for the lower and middle class, while common goods, strategic public services, public assets, and natural resources are under an extensive program of scandalous privatizations. The results of this policy are the transformation of a financial crisis into a crisis of public finances. More than 230 billion euro has been offered in cash and guarantees to rescue and recapitalize the Greek private banking sector since 2009. The dramatic deterioration of the economy since super austerity led the country to dive deeply into recession for 6 consecutive years, a phenomenon that was only seen in countries engaged in warfare. And at the same time, the Greek public debt has risen from 125% to 170% since 2010, and according to the annual report by the Levy Institute, it will reach 200% by the end of 2015 if the same policy is maintained. And Ioannis will continue.
So, hello there. My colleague tried to briefly analyze the situation, the prevailing situation in the last 4 years. I will try to answer to the second question of our presentation, which has to do with the rise of the radical left, socio-political alliances, popular resistances, and the phenomenon of Syriza. After 4 years of authoritarian ruling that Giorgos described, the violent proletarization of lower and middle classes has created the social environment of a real humanitarian crisis in Greece. The general unemployment rate is approaching 30%. It's the highest in the European Union, while youth unemployment rate is also the highest in the European Union, and it is approximately 60%, with approximately 1.6 million of Greeks being unemployed in total. At the same time, Greece records an explosion of homelessness and suicide rates, while 1/3 of the general population has lost access to social security and consecutively to free healthcare, including children's access to free vaccination. In Greece right now, we have the reappearance of diseases that have been cured through vaccination in the 50s and 60s, and that's the reality. This humanitarian crisis has led to an unprecedented rupture in the formerly hegemonic sociopolitical bloc and the dominant relations of sociopolitical representation, and consecutively to the unprecedented increase of the social, political, and electoral appeal of Syriza. In the 2 historical electoral battles of May and June 2012, Syriza, the radical left coalition, was chosen by the vast majority of anti-memorandum and anti-austerity voters, among many other heterogeneous political forces that expressed anti-memorandum, anti-austerity, or even anti-capitalist positions, like, for example, the Communist Party of Greece, the newcomers of the right-wing populist party of the independent Greeks, the neo-fascist gang of the Golden Dawn, or even some electorally insignificant extreme left parties and coalitions. In the first electoral battle, in the 17th of May 2012, Syriza obtained 16.8 and became the second largest political force in the national parliament. During the following weeks, Syriza rejected any negotiation of joining a government coalition together with the right-wing Party of New Democracy and the Social Democrats of PASOK, whose tactic was to entrap our coalition into an authoritarian government of so-called national unity or national salvation. This stance of Syriza led to the collapse of negotiations and to new elections in the 7th of June 2012, in which Syriza rose up to 26.7, elected 51 out of 300 MPs in the parliament, 71 MPs out of 300 in total, became the first party in all traditional blue-collar and lower middle-class districts and amongst the youth, but unfortunately didn't reach victory for a very small margin of 2%. It was the first time since 1958 that the party of the alternative left became the major opposition force in the Greek National Parliament. But if the 7th of June 2012 was a day of a great political and electoral rupture in the contemporary political history of Greece, the 25th of May 2014 was a day to remember for all generations of Greek left militants, for the survivors of the anti-Nazi resistance and the civil war, for our parents' generation of the student movement against the military dictatorship, but also for our own generation, the generation that built its own ideological and political identity through the anti-global civil disobedience movement and the social forum process. And it was a day to remember because the left actually won. Syriza won the European elections. We became the leading political force in Greece and forced even some of the most fanatic neoliberal hardliner talking heads of corporate media to start speaking about the next government in waiting. Let me try to sum up by describing the main reasons and distinguishing characteristics that allowed Syriza to become the new counter-hegemonic political project in Greece and the first post-communist radical left party to compete for power in a European state. Syriza is a child of the social movements. It was initially created as a coalition in 2014 after a quinquennium of common struggles and dialogue of various radical left forces within the framework of the emerging local, national, and international resistance movements. Our coalition was created as a political experiment of unity through diversity, as a common attempt to overcome the historical, ideological, cultural, and political fragmentations of the post-war era, and also to express and integrate the demands and aspirations of the various social resistances in the arena of central political and electoral battles. During the last decade, Syriza has been ever present in social struggles, from traditional workers and students' movements to questions of identities, without falling back when facing possible political costs. Recent highlights and turning points have been the organization of the 4th European Social Forum in Athens, May 2006, which brought together 100,000 citizens in the streets of Athens, the victorious educational movement against the creation of private universities, 2006-2007, the nationwide youth revolt in December 2008 after the murder of a teenager, Alexandros Grigoropoulos, by a police officer, or even a series of local environmental movements since Syriza, and to be more accurate, its main predecessor party, Synaspismos, was the first force of the Greek left that actually incorporated the red-green agenda in its identity already since the 90s. During the last years of the crisis, Syriza upgraded its social utility and outreach. In May 2011, after an already long series of trade unions' general strikes, we experienced the emergence of the Greek version of the Occupy movement, the movement of the squares, which started and mainly centralized in Syntagma, which means Constitution Square in Athens. The development of the movement of the squares in Greece was a turning point that triggered rapid political developments. The outburst of social protests forced Papandreou to resign and deliver power to a government coalition of social democrats, conservatives, and right-wing populists led by an unelected technocrat, the former general manager of the Bank of Greece, Mr. Papadimos. The unprecedented endurance of the movement against police repression maximized social pressure against the memorandum strategy and politicized thousands of lower and middle-class citizens who realized that there cannot be personal solutions to collective problems. Syriza, not accidentally, but because of our prior collective experiences from the new social movements, demonstrated efficient political reflexes, and at a time when the leadership of the Greek Communist Party denounced the movement of the squares as a pseudo-movement manipulated by the system and oriented to petit bourgeois demands, Syriza activists joined all committees and workshops in the squares, helped in organizing the resistance against police repression, and tried to politicize the debates in the popular assemblies, not in an avant-gardist mentality, not with Syriza flags and banners dominating the squares, but with an open mentality of listening and getting contaminated with real people's aspirations. In April 2012, when the opinion polls were still giving Syriza less than 8%, we made the decisive step. We called for the unity of all Greek left and progressive anti-memorandum forces, and at the same time we became the first left force that put on the table the question of gaining power. In July 2013, Syriza organized its first Congress and transformed itself from a coalition of 18 different smaller or bigger parties and organizations into a unified, multi-tendency, radical left and democratic party. Nevertheless, the question of building a new historical bloc of sociopolitical forces that will confront, from the position of the next government of Greece, our rival superpowers in a national and international level, remains of utmost and central importance for us, as we today escalate our unitarian initiatives against the current unprecedented privatization program in the direction of forcing our disastrous coalition government to leave and allow popular verdict to be expressed in favor of the first popular unity government in the political history of Greece. Because, as Alexis Tsipras wrote in his last article a few days ago, we very well comprehend that the process of the conquest of state power will be a long process of struggle and conflict, the outcome of which will depend on the ability of Syriza to achieve the broadest possible consensus and create the broadest possible social and political alliances around specific dilemmas that will arise. Our first priorities in this process, as we have already publicly committed, are the cancellation of the memoranda and the overthrow of austerity, as well as the renegotiation of the loan agreement between Greece and its lenders. One could argue, of course, that this path is full of dangers. Allow us to end our presentation by recalling one of the brightest minds of the Greek and the European left, our very own Nikos Poulantzas, who wrote that the only way to avoid possible dangers of democratic socialism is to stay put and be subordinated to the supervision of advanced liberal democracy. Sorry, but we'll pass. We're not a religious sect isolated in a ranch in the desert. We're militants of the left of the 21st century dedicated to our historical mission of social change. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Ioannis and Giorgos.
One last thing. We might be collectively broke as a party and as a country, but we didn't come empty-handed. We would like to thank the Rosa Luxemburg branch in New York for the very kind invitation by offering you a symbolic gift, the flag of Syriza.
Thanks so much.